We're going to talk about Agile principles and Agile mindset today. Again, my name is Jamey Lees, and I have a little agenda here we have for the first Agile Wednesday series. We're gonna compare the waterfall, like Dominic said. We're gonna compare the waterfall principles to Agile principles. A lot of, when I go to a lot of sessions and whatnot, they talk about Agile, but they don't talk about waterfall. So I'm going to go ahead and compare the waterfall and then also the Agile principles, so we can get grounded on what's the biggest difference, right? And the other thing is, we're going to go back in time and we're going to look at Agile. Where did it even come from? A lot of folks talk about the manifesto, but even before the manifesto, we had things that happen in Agile in industry, and it helps us ground us as far as where did Agile come about, and also the meaning of Agile and why it's important. Why are companies today all migrating to Agile? And then we're going to talk briefly about the mindset. So when you walk away from today's session, my hope is you're going to have a great understanding of why Agile reduces and removes waste compared to the traditional waterfall. It's number one. The other thing, the difference in between the scope, schedule, and cost and quality in between the Agile methodology versus the frameworks of Agile. And then the difference of the delivery model. We'll go over the delivery model of waterfall versus Agile and what the difference is, right? And then hopefully today you walk away and Agile is not such this mystery or, an idea or this drink the Kool-Aid kind of concept, but it'll make sense to everyone. And we're also going to have a poll. So Dominic's going to send out a poll and poll everyone. And as soon as you answer the poll and it comes up, I'm going to pause and then we can review your answers. We want to know what type of methodology, or if you're in Agile, and also your certifications. So I'll keep on moving on until that poll comes up. And like I said, I'll go ahead and stop as soon as that poll pops up. Oh, there's the poll right now. Go ahead and answer the poll, if you would. And your certifications. All right, if you can, everyone answer that, and we can see the results.
The answers are still coming in. Let's wait.
Still coming in. All right.
Yeah, another 10 or 15 seconds, and I'll end the polling.
All right.
We got 27 of 28 people have voted. The other person is getting another beer. So I'll go ahead and end the polling.
I'm glad that I could be so entertaining. All right. So hopefully everyone can see the poll. We got some waterfall. It's a little, I got to squint down right here. We got Agile. It's about almost half here, right? Hybrid, 40%. That's good. So today's presentation, that's going to be a very good review of, the waterfall, Agile, and hybrid, right? People got a lot of PMP, so that's great. 74%, right? PMI, ACP, we got a low number. Yeah, Scrum Masters, that's good. That's good. All right, thank you for taking that poll today. Let me go ahead. Yep. All right, so Agile. So this represents this visual right here, and you can see you got the source right here. You can take your phone if you have an iPhone and go click on the QCR, and it'll highlight. It'll take you to the website. So Agile, there's lots of different methodology Agile. So if you go to the upper right, you got Scrum. Scrum is the most popular that we have. Scrum is, and then we have extreme programming, and then we have Kanban. Kanban is starting to make a move into the Agile world. In Agile, but you can see that you got the backlog. You go to the lower right, the backlog. A lot of folks, you say, "Hey, are you working on this task, or when are you going to start this?" And they say it's on the backlog. A lot of people use the word backlog for something they are "quote unquote" not doing, right, or never going to do. That's really not the concept of Agile. It's supposed to be all the ideas that the product owner and then even the sprint team want to achieve for the product to add value. It's not something you put on the back burner and never visit it. That's not the concept in Agile. But a lot of people misuse the backlog all the time. And then the retrospect is, of course, the quality of Agile, where you're going to constantly look at what are the better way of doing it, and then the flexibility built into Agile so you can adapt and change the market, and the lowering of the risk. We're going to talk about all these concepts today. Sorry about the pause here. I'm trying to go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. All right, so I referred to all the different Agile approaches, right? There's tons of them out there. If you go to the web and use the umbrella of Agile, there's lots and lots of different frameworks out there. And I know it's very confusing to understand, what are the frameworks out there, right? Well, they all go back to the manifesto, and they're subsets of the overall approach of Agile. So once you understand the mindset and the principles of Agile, these other approaches can be easily adopted. They're different techniques and tools, and one's not better than the other. It's just another way of people solving the same problem, but staying under the umbrella of Agile. And certain companies, certain aspects of these approaches work better than others at other companies. And then also we have companies are demanding or asking, hey, okay, so if we have 6 people working on a project, how do we scale that to a larger scale? And then Agile community answer that with a DA, and then a Scrum of Scrum, and then SAFe, and then less, and Enterprise Scrum. So those methodologies are going to be becoming more and more popular, where larger companies want to obtain Agile discipline, et cetera. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about, the waterfall principles versus the Agile principles. Very straightforward. Agile. What's the focus of Agile? It's really the business value, right? That's the number one focus, is the customer value. That's what is trying to be achieved in Agile. And then you got a little acronym MOSCAL: must have, should have, could have. The must is, what is the must to return the result of the highest value when you're delivering something? That's really the focus of Agile. What is the value? Now, waterfall, what is the waterfall about? What is the waterfall focus? Really, it's about the process, right? You measure the process, and you lock down the scope, you lock down the schedule, and you manage the cost. You're constantly ticking and tying all these things as a project manager, and you are managing the process, right? The focus of the value is assumed. If you follow the process, you will achieve the value. That's the assumption, right? But you manage the process. When are you going to get done? Or if you get status on a schedule and someone says, well, I'm 75% done and it's Friday. What do you say to that resource? Well, you have all weekend before Monday, right? That's the focus, is the process. Make the schedule and stick to the schedule. And that's the approach of waterfall. That's the biggest difference. So Steve Jobs, he understood a concept that a lot of folks talk about in Agile, and that's the premise that people don't know what they want until they see it. And Agile tends to help this in solving that problem, where you have the waterfall concept, right? In this representation, you have all the phases as you're building this car, right? The customer doesn't see the end product until you release the last release, and then what do? You shut down your project, right? All the resources go away, and they have the end product, right? But in Agile, you're able to show the customer frequently, do you like the skateboard? Do you like the scooter? Do you like the bike? Do you like the motorcycle? And you keep on asking that question. You're showing the product. And as you go along the Agile approach, you're incrementally showing value, because the customers, they get smarter as they learn more, right? And waterfall, if a customer gets smarter, well, doesn't matter. You have the scope and you've locked down, you have the requirements. If they change their mind, it's a big lift. It can be very costly to change that scope creep, right? You have to go through a process, and you got to look at what's going to cost you more, going to shift out the schedule. That's the waterfall way. But when Agile, you have a shorter cycle, and you're going to constantly and frequently ask the customer, do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like this? Right? You're going to have your demos. And then also, ultimately, the market is going to tell you, right? Ultimately, when you release, and you're going to be able to release earlier in the market. So the overall framework, you look at the Agile framework, you have an idea and you have the backlog. Again, a backlog is not something you are never going to do. It is something you prioritize, and it's a list of ideas they want to bring into the flow of the Agile way. So you can see the iteration, we have a sprint right here, 1 to 4 weeks. So at that point, you don't have a sprint or a time box of iteration more than 4 weeks. So that's definitely a premise in Agile. You don't have that elongated release. And then, of course, you see the boxes of 1, 2, 3, 4, you version 1, 2, 3, and you're building value as you go. So that's really the Agile framework that fits in all the different frameworks under the umbrella with the flow. All right, so we're looking at the waterfall and Agile for fixed and variable. So let's look at what is fixed in the waterfall, right? You're going to lock down the scope, have it signed off, and you're going to measure that you're building on that scope, right? You're going to have a project plan, and you're going to say, I am going to have the quality where I'm going to have a QA team validate test cases. I'm going to go into UAT, and I'm going to get signed off, right? You're going to lock that down. You're going to have a plan. You're not going to change that, right? What is flexible? Well, if you look at the overall schedule on the waterfall coming in, you may just have the project manager, and that's a certain cost. And as you flow through, the cost will vary as you build out the team and then scale down, right? As your schedule goes through the waterfall, the cost is going to vary month to month, right? And the other thing is that if you get another request where the customer gets smarter and they want to change the scope, well, you're going to change the schedule and you're going to change the cost. So that's going to be variable in the waterfall. Now, Agile. So you can see the quality, right? They're going to have a structure in whatever framework you have where they're going to have retrospects, they're going to have validation of demos, right? They may have some automated testing, but you're going to lock that down as far as how you approach that, right? And as far as the schedule and the cost, in Agile, instead of ramping up a team across a waterfall schedule, we have analysis person, and then you have developers that come and go off of the team. You're going to have around about 6 people on the team, and that's going to be a constant cost. You always have those 6 people, so it's a fixed cost, and people will know how much it costs from month to month, right? You don't change the team. You're going to have roughly around 6 people, and then the schedule. Its schedule is going to be the iterations, right? You're going to have a 1 week iteration, or up to a month. So that schedule is always going to stay the same. So that's why that's fixed. So it's really from waterfall, you flip it upside down, right? That's the concept as far as the difference there. So looking at the Agile thinking. So the Agile way, you're going to accept change, right? And you're able to accept change because your iterations are smaller, so you can read and adjust at a lower cost, right? And you're goal-oriented on the value and your faith in the people, because you're going to put people together and say, hey, solve this problem together. And it's really about the faith in people. In waterfall, what do? Well, you want to avoid change, scope creep. You don't want to do that. It's very expensive if you accept change later in a waterfall traditional approach. It's very costly. It's very expensive to, move that big cruise ship the other way. It takes a long time. It's very costly, et cetera. And you're task oriented. Friday night, hey, you're 80%. We need it by Monday. Work the weekend, right? Your focus is on the process and meeting that schedule, right? And that's the faith in the process and the tools instead of the people. That's the biggest shift and difference in between the Agile and traditional approach. What are the assumptions? Well, the customer's first, right? And the other thing, the customer doesn't know what they want until they see it. So Steve Jobs had that concept, right? You could see that in all the inventions he had, in the products, right? So the assumption is the customer don't know what they want until they see it, and then when you have shorter iterations, you can ask that question in shorter duration, right? And constantly probe the customer and even the market. You can put something in the market and know right away if the customer is going to adapt to it or not, right? And then make another release to continue to bring the value to the customer, right? So that's the assumption. The other thing, developers are going to learn the wrong way. They may not know everything right off the bat, but they're going to grow and learn together, right? And the other thing is that you welcome change. Well, you're able to welcome change because the cycle is so short, you can adapt, right? But in waterfall, you definitely don't want to incorporate change, especially late in the process. It's very costly. All right, so waterfall. What is the waterfall assumptions? Well, we're looking at the customer knows what they want. I've never met a customer who knows what they want. They may sign off on requirements, and later on they see the product and they say, "Ooh, that's not what I thought that requirement meant," right? So that could be a big risk when you do that. And you assume the developers know how to do things. Well, developers learn along the way. If they haven't done a certain technology, or they have the language, or they know the technology, but they'll learn along the way, better ways of doing it. But the assumption is they know how to do the job, right? And nothing will change, right? If you plan enough up front, you shouldn't have to change anything. That's the assumption. Let's go over, this is the base, I mentioned this before, the basis of all the Agile frameworks that are out. But the basic premise is that the highest priority is the customer, right? Is the value of the customer. So that's what drives Agile, right? You're going to welcome change in the process, right? Because you're always going to ask the customer, is this what you want? Is this the value, right? That's a constant thing, a shorter duration, right? And you're going to harness the customer's competitive advantage, right? That would be the prioritization of the competitive advantage. And and within Agile, it allows the team to shift gears and change direction, so you can give the customer, your product owner, a competitive advantage, or stay up on the market. So it's very powerful. But the manifesto, the link right there, if you haven't read it, go ahead and read it. But that is the heart of Agile, where all these frameworks come from. What are the values? Well, looking at Agile, the 4 main values is individual interactions over process. Well, I had, in a lifetime ago, I was on a project and I was an integrator. And so we kept on, if you ever work with Kanban, one of the things about Kanban, it'll measure the transition from one process to another, right? And they want the transition to be very efficient, right? What we had, our challenges were, we had developers on mainframe, Windows, and then also on Sun Solaris, Unix. And we had to integrate all their code and make it run. And one of the biggest risks we had was they would come together and everything would work in their own little development environment. And then we put it in the version control, and then we release it to an environment and nothing would work. And we'd spend so much time on trying to find that needle in a haystack, trying to figure out what was what. And all the developers are like, well, that's not my code. My code works, right? And it wasn't really a collaborative environment. So what I did, how did I solve that problem? What I did is I created automated integration where all the different environments from mainframe and Windows, et cetera, as they were working on their code, when they checked it in automatically where it would go in the code baseline. And then I went to all the developers and said, okay, we're going to have a daily integration and daily run of our code. So every day at 4:30, I would run a baseline and I'd run the code. And then I had a report, and it would have a smiley face or a frown face on the different systems that failed. The first day, most of them failed. And then after that, we had success runs and integration after that. So what did that do? What happened? It wasn't, I joked around, I called it an embarrassment report, right? You don't want to be in the report, you want your code to run. It wasn't to call out people individually. It was nothing I shared with management. It was us as a team. And our focus was have working software daily. Plus, what it did is, as someone was working on software, it helped them interact with other developers so they would coordinate the handoff of the system handoffs within the overall system to make sure it worked daily. And we went from nothing working to everything working daily after that. And our our acceleration went through the roof. And then I would go in the room and wherever was co-located and everyone was collaborating. So that is the agile and the focus of things you could do for a team to help them get across the line together. The other value is customer collaboration. You want the customer involved. You want their feedback on a daily basis, right? And you want to respond to change. When you want to solve a problem, respond to change instead of focusing on your plan and managing a plan. The plan, if it's out of date and you know it's not right, then throw it away. You know, you want to go and react, and Agile allows you to do that. All right, do we have questions so far? I'm going to have little pauses in the chat to see if we have any questions. Do we have any questions so far?
Yeah, we do. Paul has a question. I was going to answer it, but it's really hard, and I don't know what the answer is. So
okay,
I'm going to send it over to you. Paul asks, is there a concept like scope creep with Agile?
So that's a very good question. So in Agile, you know, they'll have roadmaps of where they want the product to be, right? But as far as scope creep, that's really in the waterfall where, since you're locking down the scope, right, and you sign it off, everyone knows as you go through the waterfall process, it's very costly to accept scope creep, right? The customer gets smarter as you go, and then all of a sudden, there's more and more and more requirements after your sign off. That's called scope creep. For Agile, since the iterations are so small, there's no real, we don't talk about scope creep, right? We accept the different scope that comes in. Because if you're producing something that's not good value, you need to stop and redirect. So there's really not that concept. I hope that I answered that question.
Yeah, no, excellent answer. Any more questions for people that are with us? You can type in the chat window, type your questions, and you can type them any time. We have a couple of breaks here throughout the presentation.
Yep.
Where
Yeah.
Answer questions.
Thank you. I'm going to move forward. I realized on my time, I got a lot more material to go through. But anyway, as far as the Agile reducing the waste, so on projects, so if you are 6 months in a waterfall project and all of a sudden you realize you need to take another direction in a waterfall, it's very costly, right? You can't go back in time. You wasted 6 months, right? In Agile, it reduces the waste where you're going to have an iteration of either a week or a month, right? So it lowers the waste. Since you can't go back in time and make up what you've already done, it reduces the overall waste, right? So that's that question. And then as far as the waterfall and the scope schedule costs, you can see the Agile flips on the side. You have, you know, the team members and they work on it, right? So that's the biggest difference right there. All right, where did Agile come from? Well, it actually came from the manufacturing industry. When we talk about Agile today, it's, you know, software, right? Everyone talks about software. But in my opinion, where the biggest leap was the new product development game. You could see that these different industries, 3M, Xerox, Hewlett-Packard, Epson, they all had a concept of Agile way back when in 1986 when this paper was published. And what they did is they were trying to be competitive in the market, and they took different engineers. They would have an electrical engineer, they would have a mechanical engineer, a assembly line engineer, a design engineer, and they would throw them in a room. And they were from different functional areas of the company because they were very structured, hierarchical structure. And they would say, we want you to create this, right? And they would get together and they would have a vision and a goal, an idea, right? And they would collaborate and they would work on different concepts. And what was great about this is that they were able to do proof of concept faster when they brought all these teams together. And they also had it where, let's say one of the engineers were like, ooh, I don't know how to solve that. They could go back to their functional area in the company and ask the question, and then people work on it and bring that back to the dynamic team they created. And then this paper talks about the different things they saw in these teams, the built-in instability. No management were in these teams. These teams were all the doers, and they were self-forming from different functional areas, right? And you could see that this was the same concept of all these agile frameworks where it came from, but it was from manufacturing, and they overlapped iterations, et cetera. And they had, they didn't have a lot of control. They would go ahead and have the transparency back to their function areas. And they would do multi-learning where, you know, one engineer would say, hey, I need a 13-volt battery. And then the other engineer would say, well, it's going to be this big, right? And then they would learn what each other areas to solve the problem for a product. So they had this concept back in this paper. I do recommend you look at the new product. It's very interesting where it came from. But why did they even start this kind of concept? Why wouldn't they just stay within their lane of the functional areas? Well, what they realized in a survey in this Harvard review is that in the 80s, 1/3 of the profit of these industries, over 33%, was on sales, right? So if you had a long process that took 5 years to produce a product, well, you're losing all the sales. You want to get time to market, right? You're losing money. So that's why they made these hybrid teams, the Agile concept, because they wanted to produce new products every year, right? It was money. All right, looking at the history, I had in 1986 with the Harvard Review. You know, there's things prior to that, but you could see how it evolved. We're in 1988 time box, and it starts going into software development, right? We started migrating Agile into software development, refactoring 1990, where you're taking the code and you're making it run better, right? And then we slide all the way over to 1995. You got the sprint concept time box, right? Then 1991, you have the manifesto. A lot of folks think it started with a manifesto. Well, I would say in software development, it really got popular after that, and all these different Agile frameworks came from that. But I just want to share with you exactly where this comes from and why Agile is so important to our industry. Any other questions right now? I got one I'll ask. Why did manufacturing industry need to create Agile approach? Well, it was really money, time to market, flexibility, right? They're inventing things. Any other questions on chat?
One great one, another tough one, however, regarding the value of working software over documentation. How do you transfer information from the Agile project team to the support team without documentation?
So that again, with Agile team to what team?
How do you transfer knowledge of how your system works from the Agile team to support, right? Eventually.
Perfect. Yeah. Great question. So it doesn't mean you do not do documentation, right? So the thing about documentation, let's say you created, let's say a 100-page document, right? Before you develop the application, right? Then you start developing the application, you realize your documentation's incorrect, right? It's really the software over documentation. So now you can't go back in time, right? All the documentation you did that you have to change was wasted time. So really it's about, you want just enough documentation so you can develop it, so you can do the transition to the support team, get the product working. You can always go back, and if it's a high value as far as delivery to your customer, so the support understands how to support it for the customer, then you can do the documentation later, right? And then you can iterate on that. You can even build documentation if it has a higher priority within the sprint cycles as well. But it doesn't mean you should do a big novel before you do the software. That's really what it means. It's a balancing act.
Excellent, thanks. A couple more questions, but let's continue on and we'll do it at the next break.
All right, thank you. All right. Why are companies migrating? Well, this is really important. Software, when you look at software, the reason they're migrating is because the features that are developed in the applications, 45% are never used. So again, you can't go back in time. If almost half of what you're doing in the software is never used, you have half the projects wasted money, wasted resource. Very costly. It's very expensive for companies to produce that, right? What does Agile focus on? Well, they're looking at that 7%, right? They're constantly focused on the value of what they're gonna use. So it's more efficient. and they're going to have smaller iterations to get there. So this is a very powerful statement right here. That's why they don't want to waste money, and then it's time to market. So that's why everyone is migrating to the Agile approach. Looking at the value proposal for Waterfall is, you can see you got all the analysis, you're building all that documentation we're talking about, right? Emphasis on documentation, you're gonna have a sign off, you're gonna documentation the design, and then coders run and code, right? And then you have built-in things. You have the unit test, you have system test, and user acceptance tests. What are we doing there? We are planning to fail. We know there's going to be bugs, right? So that's supposed to be your catch-all on your quality, right? But as you see, left to right, your risk goes up on scope creep, or if the project's canceled. Let's say the project's canceled in system testing because the market has shifted. Well, you didn't get it out the door to bring the value. You've lost all that money and the resources and time, right? But you don't see value in Waterfall until you actually release it to production. So you look at Agile, every iteration you're releasing something. There's something out there, right? You're releasing the skateboard, the scooter. You're constantly releasing value, right? You build, you measure, you learn in a small iteration. So you're building that value to your customer constantly. You're continually delivering value, small iterations, right? That is the focus of Agile, and that's why companies are attracted to Agile. And you're going to avoid the 45% of people never using it, right? You're going to know right away. You'll have reviews with your product owner, right? You have demos, working software before they release to production, so you have that handshake of value right away. All right. Anything else in the chat we can answer? What's the difference between Waterfall Delivery versus Agile? Well, you know, Waterfall is very late on delivery, and Agile delivers all the time the value, smaller increments.
One good question, especially in this time where everybody is remote working. How do you effectively collaborate if your customers are around the world, or if your product owner is on the other side of the world? How does that impact the Agile process?
Well, you know, in Agile, if you go into Agile training, they always say you got to be co-located, right? That's most effective. If you can't do that, you really want to get the same time frame. Sometimes folks will have their check-in, but you want a daily check-in, right? It may be at 8 o'clock at night, depending on where they're on the world, right? And you've got to do your best as far as getting the team together. What I've done is if you can't do that, I look at the flow of information where you start off on Monday, if you have the flow of information with the PO and then the team. If you can't bring them together, I know that's not ideal in Agile. You're not supposed to do that, right? The PO needs to be together with the team, but that's not possible. You know, you could give, you know, if you're a Scrum Master, I would meet with the PO, give them information from the last stand-up, and then give the team, and I know it's not ideal, but it's the best you can do, right? You know, and then give the team, and you could be the go-between. A lot of work, but, and you got to constantly get clarity back and forth, right? And I would have a morning meeting, afternoon meeting, morning meeting. You know, it's a lot of meetings for the Scrum Master, but if that's what you have to do, I would do daily check-ins with all parties, right? Don't let the time lag, right? Because you may go with the development team, and all of a sudden they say, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, then maybe everyone needs to get up at 1 a.m. and get together, right? You got to balance that with your PO.
Excellent, thanks. All right, continue.
All right, Agile Mindset. All right, looking at the waterfall, that's on the right side as far as management, right? Very task oriented, right? You're gonna look at the schedule. Are you done yet? When are you gonna be done? We're gonna mark down on our schedule 25%, 50%, right? We're gonna manage that task. We're gonna control that scope, right? Doing the right thing on the process, right? We're gonna manage that. We're gonna command, hey, if you don't have it done, you give me this level of effort. We got to meet the timeline, right? But if you look at the Agile servant leadership, you're focused on people empowering, right? Doing the right thing, directing them, right? I really like I don't know if anyone's read this, but the PMI ACP exam prep by Mike Griffiths. It doesn't say exactly this, but I got that from his book, where he has a concept where in Agile, you really want to pull the rope to encourage people to go do the right thing in the right direction versus telling them what to do, pushing a rope. So that helps you understand really the biggest focus areas in between, Agile versus project management, and focusing on schedule and paperwork versus actually working software. Servant leadership, just more clarity around what that is. You really want to empower the team, facilitate their success in Agile, right? You want to focus on the overall fostering the success of the team. The characteristics is, listening, creating a path for everyone to succeed. The concept I've heard is all the team is in a boat, and if there's a hole in the boat, everyone's going to fail, right? They're going to come across the line at the same time. That's the concept of Agile. It's not excelling one person's career or overall team. They're going to have a working product together. You want to build in the safety and respect and trust. I was facilitating a Scrum and Scrum team. It was like 7 or 8 different Scrum teams that come together, and I had a meeting where we were at Scrum and Scrum, and we needed a forecast of the overall sprint cycle of when they were going to finish their features to the overall epic. We wanted a horizon about 90 days out. Even though they didn't have the sprint established in the grooming, I said just estimate. And everyone was really resistant to give me a forecast. It'd be like 4 or 5 sprints. And so when I explained to them that it's really the collaboration across the different sprints, how long they're going to be in integration of other teams so we can coordinate, and also when the application is going to be released. And I told them it's okay if you need to add another sprint. And at first they were really hesitant to do that because they were worried that if they put down 6 sprints and then they wanted 2 more, that everyone's going to scrutinize them and say, why did you add 2 more? Well, that's not the Agile way. That's more the waterfall way of the process. And I explained to them that I just need to know when we're going to go over the line, because we've told the customers in the market, it's outside of our firm, that we were going to have this product at this time. It's okay that we didn't have all the bells and whistles. It was we needed to work with a product owner to understand what we had, and we need to look at, can we do something manual behind the scenes where the customer wouldn't even know it's manual, but we would get together and solve that problem. And we did a couple times. But when I really got the trust is when someone had 7 sprints and they came to the Scrum and Scrum and they say, hey, I need 1 more. And I added 1 more to the overall radiator view of the portfolio and the project where I was working on. And we didn't even talk about why they needed 1 more. I just added it, and then we moved on, and that was it. At that point, it was like floodgates. Everyone's like, oh, I think it's 4 or 5 sprints. And then I could fill up my whole board up, and everyone could have the visibility. It was pretty amazing. I didn't realize that was what was going on. But once I built that trust, it was great to see that. We didn't focus on the process. We focused on how we can solve the problems for the future. All right, so Scrum Pillars. And Scrum is one of the most popular Agile frameworks. We have transparent inspection and adoption. Quality is built in already. That's the focus of the pillars. And the values, you want all the team to focus, courage, openness, commitment, and respect, right? That's what you want to foster. We have lean mindset, keep it simple, right? You ain't gonna need it. It helps prioritization to avoid the 45% never use, right? Just in time, that's where you don't want to over document something or work on some process because you can't go back in time and make up for it, right? So if you spend a lot of time on a user story or grooming something and then all of a sudden the PO goes up, it died on the vine, we're not gonna do that anymore. Well, you just wasted all that time, right? So you really want to do just enough as you're going through the cycles so it's not a waste of time. Here's the overall Agile framework. You can see the backlog, you got prioritization, and then you got the sprint backlog, and you'll prioritize that and go through the cycle, and you're going to iterative. Agile smaller teams compared to the traditional waterfall. Quality's built in, lower risk, customer satisfaction. That's the number one on this. All right, I'm hoping that today I answered some of the Agile mysteries, and it's not so mystical for everyone. And thank you for having me. Is there any other chats you want to talk?
Yeah,
I'll try to give us 10 minutes to talk here.
Yeah, there's a really good question in
Perfect.
that some projects have an absolute fixed budget and they have a fixed schedule. Often the person didn't ask it this way, but I can think, Y2K, there was an actual scheduled deadline. So how would you deal with a project that truly has a fixed budget and or a fixed schedule?
Yeah, so in Agile, sometimes you have your salesperson and they go out and they commit to the market. They're going to have something done, right? And the team's, we don't have that, right? And you're scrambling, right? I was in an Agile meeting, and it was interesting. One of the gentlemen presented, they were talking about how you could have the MVP. So I think I had in the slide right here, minimal valuable product, right? And they had a concept where they have a website, right? You have a website and people fill out their information, they submit it, but behind the scenes, there was no system that there was a person taking it and logging it manually. So it's really about the value of getting across the line. Sometimes you don't have the time to put everything together, but the team will come together to come across that line together. So that's really the concept. You may not have everything automated, but it's really about focus on the value. For the customer on filling out that form, they're getting what they need. I know on the behind the scenes, it may be a little hectic, but you're going to make that timeline. And then you're going to iterate and you're going to create all the functionality besides that or behind that. Once you realize the customer do have value in filling out the form and whatever the process is. So, and even in my experience, we couldn't move our timeline, right? It was already in the public eye that we were going to have a feature functionality, but behind the scenes, we would manually put stuff together and they wouldn't know any different. And then after that, we iterate and then we'd automate it. Hope that helps.
Yep. Another question, what do you think is the biggest challenge that companies have when transitioning from Waterfall to Agile?
The biggest, I would say every company is a little different. I think that a lot of folks come in and they ask for blind faith, and that's really hard for people to swallow. I think people need to educate themselves in Agile before they try it and get trained, get the certifications, they understand the ground, and then try it. And management needs to support it where they don't hold people accountable like they did in projects, right? They need to almost put them on an island to experiment without risk, right? And it's part of the culture. And management needs to have a little faith and then see if they get results out of it, right? It's really the culture.
Fantastic. I got a couple of closing comments, so we're going to wrap it up. So thank you, Jamey, for sharing the information today. If everybody can, silently clap for Jamey in your self-quarantine room. Thank you for presenting. Here's our token of our appreciation. We usually give a gift to speakers. We'll do that when we are all able to get back together. Everybody stay safe and have a great week, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you, Dominic.
Yep, thanks, Jamey.